welcome to another Lawn Fawn video. Today we are so excited to be introducing our brand new stamp set, Mice Flowers, its coordinating dies and coordinating coloring stencils. We're also going to be introducing our daisy border die. This die is so super cute. I love daisies so much. We'll also take a look at our Folksy Tulip Border die, which is so pretty, and also at our big blossom flowers, which I love these flowers. We've also come out with a Scripty Friends outline to go along with our previously released Scripty Friends die. So now we have that really cool shadow base for the Scripty Friends. And we're going to be taking a look at our Spring Flowers Stencils. This is a set of 3 stencils, and it's one of my favorite stencils ever. It is so cute. So let's go ahead and check it out. These Spring Flower Stencils have these really great etched guidelines. So we have the etched in numbers 1, 2, and 3, and then also etched guidelines so that they're really easy to line up. So we're going to start with stencil number 1, and here I have some sunflower ink, and I'm going to ink over this whole stencil. I'm going to create the look of Black-Eyed Susans with this, which is so cute. I love that you can mix and match any colors in your stash to make custom backgrounds that are so beautiful. This also would be a nice way to add a cool detail onto different die cut shapes as well. So now we've covered the whole thing in our sunflower ink, and honestly, that background like that is cute, just like that. But we are going to move on to number 2, and we're going to add our flower centers. And that's what I like about this, is you can get 3 different looks depending on if you use all 3 stencils or just 2 stencils or just 1. So now we've lined up this, and we're going to be inking over the flower centers with some dough ink to get that kind of sunflower / Black-Eyed Susan look. And so we're going to ink over this whole thing in just the one color, but of course you could do multicolors too, and that would be really pretty as well. And once we have the whole thing covered, we can go ahead and peel up the stencil. And again, this background is so adorable just as is. But if you want to add little leaves, you can see we have stencil number 3 here. It has those etched guidelines that you're going to line up with those flowers, and then we're just going to press that down, and we're going to use some freshly cut grass ink here to fill in all of these cute leaves. And there's something about once you add that pop of green that just looks so beautiful. Isn't this just the prettiest background? This background with a simple sentiment, or maybe a cute circle in the middle with an adorable little image in it. Oh, just the perfect card. So sweet. And I wanted to also show you how you can take this background and ink over pattern paper or different colors of cardstock. So here I have some Watercolor Wishes paper in that really pretty pink color. And we are going to line up our stencils again, but we're going to be inking over the pattern paper, which I think is such a pretty look. So we're going to go ahead and ink over all of these flowers. And I love how subtle this background is. It's kind of like a nice tone on tone background if you just did one stencil. But I'm going to go ahead and use a second stencil. I also think you could continue with the tone on tone and use that same bubblegum ink. But in this case, I'm going to use some carrot ink to have some orange flower centers. You can see here I'm kind of checking to see, do I like how this looks? And I thought it looked pretty cute. So I'm going to keep inking over the whole thing. And then we can peel up that stencil and you can see just how cute this is looking. There's just something about pink and orange together that I just love. Now next up, I'm going to add the little leaves. And I ended up making the leaves maybe a little bit too bold. I think if I did this again, I would use some celery stick ink, which is a lighter green, but it's still going to turn out super cute. And here is a comparison between the 2 backgrounds that I just made. It's so fun to make your own custom pattern paper. You can do all sorts of different colors. You can ink onto pattern paper like we did here, or different colors of cardstock. And Chari in just a little bit is going to show you a really cool technique with white ink and kraft cardstock that I just love. It's also really great that this pattern can be landscape or portrait. It looks great in either direction. Now next up, we're going to take a look at the Folksy Tulip Border. This is the latest in these little border series that have the beautiful cutouts and little dotted details. They are just so pretty. You can layer them over colors of cardstock to let that cardstock shine through in such a beautiful look. I just love that little dotted detail. It's so delicate and it almost looks like a beautiful, gorgeous ribbon. Then here we have our daisy border dies, which comes with the daisy border, individual flowers, and then individual flower centers that you can mix and match. I love that it has the individual flowers because you can add color onto your borders in a really fun way, or you can also use those little flowers on their own. So the first way to use the daisy border is to just use it plain like we have here. So we've die cut it out of some white cardstock, but you could do pink or purple or any favorite color. And we're just going to add the flower centers onto each of these daisies. And I love daisies and sunflowers. They are my favorite flowers. They're just so cute. It's just so happy. It reminds me of one of those daisy chain necklaces. It's just adorable, just like this. All you need to add is those flower centers and it would be a perfect detail onto a card. But another thing you can do is have alternating colors, and that's where those separate flowers come in. So we're going to add flower centers onto each of these little flowers, and then what we're going to do is we're going to alternate them on to the border so that we have alternating colors. And again, you could pick any colors that are going to go along with the color scheme of your card, or maybe the recipient's favorite colors. And you'll see that those daisies layer right over top each one, and so we're going to layer kind of alternating on each one to get this really, really pretty look. A third way that you can use this daisy border is to layer the flowers on top, but to just shift them a little bit to get a little bit of a different look. So we're going to add our flower centers into each of the individual daisies. And then what we're going to do is we're going to layer the flower, but instead of perfectly lining it on top this time, we're just going to shift it over to make it look like a really full flower. Isn't that really pretty? You could do contrasting colors like we've done here. You could do maybe a lighter shade of pink and a darker shade of pink, or you could do them all in the same color so that it just looked like these big fluffy flowers. And isn't that really cute? You could do them alternating, or of course you could fill the whole thing in with the bigger, fluffier flowers. And I love that with one border die, you can get so many different looks. Now next up, we're going to take a look at our big blossom flowers. You can see we have some stems, we have the flowers, we have flower centers, we have some leaves in different sizes and facing in different directions, and we have a little bud detail, so it looks like a flower that hasn't quite opened up yet. So the first thing we're going to do is add those cute little flower centers onto the flowers, and I love that it has that fun little detail on it that really gives it a lot of texture. Then we're going to take one of those little base pieces there and we're going to layer that onto the flower bud that hasn't quite opened yet so that it kind of has that really pretty base detail. Then you'll see at the top of the stems we have like this little half circle, and it's a perfect place to be able to put your liquid glue and then just layer your flower right on top. Isn't that so super cute? And I love that the stems are facing in two different directions so you can get lots of different looks. And then here you can see what it looks like layered with the bud on there. And then of course you can add the leaves. And I love that the leaves are pointing in different directions and also different sizes too. So just depending on the look you're going for on your card. So we're going to add some liquid glue to the bottom part of the stem there and then just layer that behind the actual stem of the flower. So a little bit of glue on the stem of the leaf and we're going to layer it behind the stem of the flower. And then here you can see what those smaller leaves look like. I also like mixing the larger and smaller leaves together because I think that's just a really, really cute look. And then of course we can layer our flower on top, or you can also layer that cute little bud on top. And I think having a mix of them on a card is just adorable. Now, these flowers may look familiar, and that's because they are a similar style to our big blossom backdrops. We have these really cool backdrops in both a landscape and a portrait orientation, and I wanted to show you the comparison between them. So here's our brand new big blossom flower, and then here is that original backdrop. And so you can see the difference in the size. So you can mix and match these together. You could even add these like little tinier flowers into your backdrops too, which would be so super cute. But I love that we have a larger size flower and now a smaller one to be able to mix and match for super cute scenes. Now this is our Scripty Friends outline. We've been coming out with these outline shadow-based dies for our previous Scripty words. So Scripty Friends came out years and years ago, and now we have this awesome base for it. On the base, there's like an embossed guide that shows you exactly where to layer your die cut. We're going to add some liquid glue behind that and then layer that. And you can see that the base just gives it a bolder look on your card, and it makes it really easy to pop it up on your card too. We can add the little dot for the eye, and isn't that so super cute? I love that word friends, and I love that it goes so well with all of these cute flower themed items. Next up, we're going to take a look at the mice flower stamp set, and our little mice are at it again, and now they are holding these super cute flowers. We have one holding a potted flower and another one giving a flower a hug. We also have these super cute little bees with smiley faces that just make me smile, and then some little trails that you can stamp behind them or you can die cut and layer behind them, which is really sweet. And then we have some fun little tiny phrases. We have "you make me smile" and then "buzz" to go along with the bees. And then some large phrases. So if friends were flowers, I'd pick you, which is so super cute. And then we also have I'm glad we're, and then the word friends here in this fun little outline. And I love these because you can color in the letters. You can also use that I'm glad we're to go along with the die cut friends that we looked at earlier. So now I'm going to be using some alcohol markers to color in my cute little images here. You could use your favorite alcohol markers like Copics or Olos or whatever you have in your stash. You could use colored pencils, watercolors. There's so many different ways. And then of course we also have the coloring stencils that we're going to take a look at in just a little bit. Here you can see I'm using some E30 markers for the mice. I like to have just a little bit of shadow on the edge and keep it really light towards their faces so that it kind of looks like the sun is shining down on them. Then I'm going to give them some cute little rosy cheeks, and then we can start to color in the flowers. And I love these flowers because you can use so many different colors, just like the die cut flowers too. And so for these ones, I'm going to make a black-eyed Susan, kind of like we did with that cute little pattern with the stencil that we made at the beginning. So I'm going to use some nice yellows. And then for the other flower, I'm going to do a white daisy. So I'm going to add a yellow center and then a brown center here onto this flower. So it looks like a sunflower or black-eyed Susan. We'll add some color for the dirt. And then for the pot, I'm going to bring in this nice bright turquoise, but of course you could bring in any fun color that's going to kind of give a pop of color to your card. And then for the white daisy, I just used a warm gray marker and just added a little bit of that gray on the edge of the petals, and you can see it really makes them pop. Now we're going to add some color to those cute little bees, and then I'm going to color these letters in a rainbow order because I just can't help myself. Whenever we have the outline letters, I have to do rainbow. And so here you can see I'm just adding in all of my colors, which is so super cute, and I just love these little mice. They are adorable. Now next up we have the coordinating dies for this. You can see that they're already separated there, so all you need to do is just line them up with your stamped image, hold them in place with some low tack tape, we'll run it through the die cut machine, and we'll have perfectly cut out images every time. I love that the dies have a die for the word friends because you can have that cut out, which looks so cute. And then of course you can use the I'm glad we're right there and layer that, or you could even just use the word friends on its own as well. I love that you can use the little guys on their own with the little bees flying around, or you can bring them together in a card. They're also a great match for the daisy border and those big blossom flowers too. Now these are the coloring stencils. You can see it is a set of 2 stencils, and we size the stencils to the same size as the stamp set so that they're really easy to kind of store together in whatever way that you might store them. Now we have etch guidelines on these stencils that make it really easy to line up, and here I'm using some sugar cookie ink and I'm just brushing it onto the mouse. I'm making sure to put more ink to one side than the other, and that way he has a really nice shaded look. And we can work our way across the stencil and start filling in the rest of the mouse. So we filled in the ears and the nose and now his cute little belly with some Ballet Slippers ink. Then we can line up the leaves, and I'm going to use some jalapeno ink for a nice bright green on those leaves and stem. And then we can start to line up the flower. Now for coloring stencils, I usually just use one color of ink on each step, but in this case I wanted there to be a little bit more shading on the leaves. So I did lemonade, then I did sunflower, but it wasn't quite enough, so I brought in some carrot ink just to give it that nice shading. So you can use one color of ink or multiple on each image. Now here we've lined up the flower center, and so I'm going to be using some brown ink for that, some dough ink. And then again we can work our way down the stencil. So next we're going to do the dirt that's in the pot, and we can add some brown ink to that. And then we can add color into this cute little pot. And so I'm going to be doing some turquoise, just like we did when we colored with markers, but now we're getting a really similar look with our coloring stencils. And isn't that so pretty? I love the soft look and the gorgeous shading you can easily get with the coloring stencils. And next up, Chari is going to blow you away with some gorgeous cards. So take it away, Chari.
So on this card, I am going to use the new Big Blossoms flowers. I am also using the Scripty Thinking of You from the previous release with that Thinking of You outline. So I've cut the outline from the new Mist cardstock and the Thinking of You sentiment from Narwhal cardstock. I also have some little hearts cut with the Hearts and Stars Skinny Tag die that's out of Ballet Slipper cardstock. But the first thing I want to do is make a background for my card. So I have a piece of craft paper cut with the largest of the outside ends stitched rectangles, and I'm going to use the new Spring Flowers stencils. Now this is a 3-part stencil, and I am going to be stenciling on the craft cardstock. So I have my stencil number 1, the number is etched in the top right corner, And because I am stenciling on kraft, I'm going to use Yeti ink. So this is a white pigment ink. I do have a tool that I reserve just for this white ink with a foam blender on the end, and I am pouncing this onto my cardstock. So I am not going around in a circle. You can see I'm going straight down and pouncing this onto my cardstock till I get that white pigment all through the stencil. And the more you put on, the darker it's going to be, but it does dry very light. So we're going to get a very subtle look with these white daisy flowers that we're creating on the background. Once I have that ink kind of all over and pretty even, I am actually going to take a brush so you can see there what it looks like. But before I pull it up, I do have a brush that I reserve for white ink as well. And I'm just going to lightly go over it and kind of smooth out the texture of the ink so we don't have the little splotchiness of the pouncing. You can see it's really bright. I'm going to let it sit here. You saw just there, after the time, it lightened up a lot. So now that it's dry enough, I can move on to stencil number 2. And this has some etching on it, so we can line this up with the flowers we've already stenciled, and we're going to stencil the centers of the flowers. So to make these look like the die cut flowers that I've already cut, I will be stenciling the centers of the flowers with some sunflower ink. You could use a distress oxide ink here if you wanted to, but since we already have the white down, this dye ink's going to sit on top of it and it's going to look fine. I'm going in with a smaller brush to get into all these little circles to create all the centers of the flowers. And then once I have all of those flower centers filled in, I can pull up my stencil and you can see there are cute little daisy flowers. So now to move on to the last stencil in this set, which is number 3, we're going to add some little leaves. So we're using freshly cut grass ink for this. And again, this has etching detail on it, so you can line this up with the flowers, and then all these little leaves will be in between. And I will just go all over with this freshly cut grass and a small brush, getting in all those little leaves, and it just fills it in nicely and gives some little pops of green to this background. So I will pull that away and we're going to see this beautiful daisy background that we created on that kraft cardstock. I just think it's so pretty, and as it dries, those colors will kind of soften up a little bit too. So now let's move on to our die cut pieces. I have my stems and my leaves cut out of green spiffy speckles paper, and I'm just adding a little bit of shading to the base of the leaves. For my flowers, I'm leaving them out of this white cardstock. We want those traditional daisies, and the centers are cut out of a yellow spiffy speckles paper. Then I can add each of these to the stems. I'm also going to go ahead and put together my sentiment. Now that Scripty Thinking of You outline add-on puts an etching line in there so you can see exactly where to put the dots of the eyes and the Scripty words themselves. So I am just adding some liquid glue on the back of those delicate Scripty words, and then I can see exactly where to line them up on that outline piece. I really love this new mist colored cardstock, and I think cutting the sentiment out of that gray really gives it a nice soft pastel look, and it's going to match our background perfectly. So now let's assemble our card, and I did not want a white border around my kraft panel. I wanted my white daisies to really pop, so I added a piece of spiffy speckles to the card base, and that's what we're going to see frame our stenciled kraft panel here. So we have those nice soft white daisies on our background, and now we're ready to add our bright white die cut daisies. And I am just adding these with liquid glue along the bottom of my panel. I am letting the stems hang off. I will trim those off here in just a little bit. And I am working fairly quickly because I don't want my glue to completely dry, because I am going to be tucking those leaves behind the stems. So I'm trimming off the stems right at the edge of the kraft panel, not at the bottom of the card, but at the bottom of the kraft panel. And then I can add my leaves. So to do this, I'll just put some liquid glue on the back, kind of pull up that stem because it's not completely dried yet, tuck the end of the leaf behind it, and then press it back down. You could also put the leaves on front of the stems if you wanted to. I just think this is a much cleaner look when I can tuck them behind. Now we're ready to add the sentiment, and I just put some foam squares all over the back so that this can be popped up above those flowers. And this card is looking really cute and sweet, but I'm never done without some little hearts usually. So I have my hearts cut out of Ballet Slipper cardstock this time, so it's much more pastel pink, which I think goes really well with the colors on this card. I'm just adding some little dots of glue around my sentiment and adding those little hearts sprinkled around. Then of course, this is the perfect place to add that sparkle. So I'm adding my sparkle to the hearts, and then I will also add sparkle to the center of the flowers. And then here is my finished card with that really cute stenciled background. I love the daisies at the bottom and the soft colors of this card. So for this card, I'm using the new Folksy Tulip Border, but I'm going to create a background. So this is what I'm making. I wanted a rainbow, and the 12 by 12 Yellow Brick Road really rainbow paper kind of already has my rainbow set up for me. So I have this cut to 6 inches wide from the 12 by 12. And then I'm just cutting each of those rainbow strips into an individual strip. Now there are more colors than I need, so I can pick and choose what colors I want on my card. So for these other 3 colors, I'll just set those aside. I could use them on another project. Then I will take each of these stripes. You can see that they are wider than my border, so that works out perfectly. And I am going to cut each of these into a strip. So I have 2 colors of pink, I have an orange, I have a yellow, a green, a blue, and that purple. So I'm going to keep these in the order that I want them. That keeps me from making any mistakes. Then I have a piece of white cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. This is what we're going to see through the openings. And I'm just using my centering ruler to mark where the center is of this panel, because I want to start in the center and then work my way towards the top and the bottom. So that is where that yellow stripe is going to go. That is my center stripe. I have 3 above, 3 below. This is the center. Now, if you had a seam between 2 as the center, you would obviously line up the top or bottom of this border with those little tick marks. But in my case, I'm going to line it up to where it's centered on those tick marks. And for each of these, I'm just putting a line of glue at the top and the bottom. For this one, I'm going to start completely centering this on my cardstock panel. So I want to make sure that that tulip that is in the middle of the border is in the middle of my card. So I can kind of look and see where the edges of this cardstock hit the tulips on the left and the right, and make sure it's nice and even. So here is where I want it to be. I can see those little marks that I made through this border die, through the openings, but that's okay because I'm going to put something around the outside and frame it, and it's going to cover that up. So I'm going to show you right here. We're going to end up putting a frame around it, and it's going to cover up those pencil marks, so don't worry about them at all. Then I'm going to work my way down, because now I can just butt the next one up against there. You could line them up exactly the same, but I'm going to offset them. So you see now my tulips are offset and they're underneath those kind of little cross designs. Then for the next one, I'll bump it back over and line up the tulip in the center. This just gives it even more interest if you kind of shift them left and right like this. Then I can do the ones on the top. Same thing, I can bump it right up against that one I started with, and everything gets lined up perfectly. Then I can take my scissors and trim off the excess right along the edge. To create the frame for this card, I'm using the reverse stitch scalloped rectangle windows, and I'm using a piece of white cardstock that's cut to 4¼ by 5½. This is going to cut the inside part and a stitching detail, so it doesn't cut the outside edge at all. And it's going to create a frame with a scalloped edge on the inside, so it's creating a little window. Now you could use a rectangle frame as well to kind of frame this out, but I thought that this gave it even more fun, springy detail with that scalloped edge. So I will just add some liquid glue all around this frame that I've created, and we'll glue that down, and that will clean up all the edges. So that will cover up the edge that we cut off, that will cover up that white that's left at the top and the bottom, and it will make it look like this rainbow background is continuous behind our frame. Now I can add this whole panel to my card base. You could glue these strips directly to the card base if you wanted, but I feel like it's much cleaner to have a panel that I can add to a card base. I can easily cut off the sides and line everything up. Then we want to add a sentiment, and I don't want to cover this up too much, so I'm going with the Scripty Friends, which is an older die, but we have a new outline for it. I've cut the outline from vellum. The new outline die will imprint a little etching line so you can see exactly where to line up the Scripty Friends sentiment, as well as the little dot of the eye. And I cut the sentiment from Storm Cloud cardstock, so it's nice and dark and it's going to stand out nicely, but it is not completely black, so it has a little bit of a softer tone, being a dark gray. So I will just line this up with the line that the die creates, and actually to make sure that it dries nice and flat, I just lay one of my acrylic blocks on it while that glue sets. For the rest of the sentiment, I'm using a stamp from the new Mice Flowers stamp set that says I'm glad we're, so it can say I'm glad we're friends. I am white embossing this on a piece of narwhal cardstock, so I treated it with anti-static powder, stamping it in clear embossing ink, and then I'm adding white embossing powder, making sure all the excess is tapped off. Then I can heat this up with my heat tool until that embossing powder melts and we get that nice bright white sentiment on that gray cardstock. And then I'm just going to trim this out with my scissors. It's really small, and really tiny things like this sometimes are hard to trim off in a trimmer, and I think scissors work great. So now we're ready to add our sentiment to our beautiful card base, and I'm actually using foam strips, cutting them in little pieces and tucking them behind that solid die cut for the word friends, so you want to make sure you don't put it in the vellum because you don't want to see it. I'm also going to add a strip to the back of this little banner that I created that says I'm glad we're. And this is just going to pop that sentiment up off that background. That background is very busy, even though it's beautiful, and this just makes that sentiment stand out even more. Then I will pop this little piece above to complete the sentiment that says, I'm glad we're friends. And then for embellishments, I went with some very clear iridescent sequins. These are going to give the most subtle shine and not take away from that colorful background at all. And then here is my finished card with that background created with the Folksy Tulip Border and the Scripty Friends sentiment. So I'm going to create a cute little card using the new Mice Flowers stamp set. You can see I've already colored and cut out my images. I'm also using the new Daisy border dies. So I've cut out my border and the individual flowers as well out of purple cardstock and the centers of the flowers. And we're going to build that border along the bottom. But first, I'm going to work on my background. I am using the new Spring Flowers stencils. There are 3 stencils, but I'm actually going to pull out the third one, which is the little leaves. We're not going to use that on this background. And I have a piece of spiffy speckles paper cut to 4¼ by 5½ on my grip mat, and I am starting with stencil number 1. So this is the big open part of the flower. I'm using some merman ink, and I'm going to be very light so you can see I'm tapping my ink off inside the lid. And I just want to stencil around the top and the corners, kind of just a little arc of flowers across the top of this panel. Then I'm going to pull off the stencil and I will grab stencil number 2, which has etching on it so you can line up those flowers. You can see it there in the light. And sorry for my head, I'm just trying to line up those. This is going to create the centers of the flowers. And because I'm doing a very tone on tone, I'm sticking with that same merman ink. And we're going to have a very, very subtle center to these flowers with doubling up the amount of ink. So you can see there, it's very subtle. And we just have this kind of shower of flowers at the top. I'm also going to kind of ink up the edges and give it kind of that vignette look by darkening the edges around where I stenciled. And I just think this adds some nice interest to the sky. Now for the grass or the ground, I'm using the stitched wavy border and some Blissful Blossoms paper. I love those little vines. I think they're really fun for grass. And I'm just making sure that I have enough space for my daisy border to fit down there. Once I have that edge cut with that stitching detail, I'm going to add a little bit of ink. This is celery stick to the edge. I just think it makes that stitching really stand out. And then I can add my daisy border. So I'm just adding some liquid glue in each of the centers and around those little petals, just some little dots of glue to help hold all this in place. Next, what I'm going to do is add those single flowers. Now, you could take the flowers and kind of shift them so that the petals are in between the petals of the border. For me, I'm just layering them right over it so that they're exactly the same. You could do whatever look that you wanted. And so now I have some yellow flowers and some purple flowers. You can see I cut yellow and purple centers as well. And I'm just going to add those to the coordinating flower. Now, the light flowers are cut out of lilac and the centers out of sugar plum. And then the border itself was cut from some yellow spiffy speckles, and I have sunflower for the yellow centers. Then once my border is all in place, I'll just trim off these little petals that are overhanging the side. And this is going to go right along the bottom. Now, before I put things together, I am going to do a little bit of stamping straight onto this background piece. I want this to say, I'm glad we're friends, but I use the Friends from Mice Flowers that has a coordinating die, those bubbly letters. So I'm just lining it up so that I can stamp the first part of the sentiment directly onto the backdrop. So I'll move that little die cut out of the way once I get my stamp lined up, and then I'll just stamp this directly onto that background that we stenciled. And now I'm ready to put this onto a card base. Now for the ground at the bottom, I'm actually going to put foam tape across the back so that we can pop it up and it has some dimension off that sky. And then this way, my little mice can be popped up too, and they look like they're on that ground with the flowers. So I'll just line this up across the bottom. Now it's popped up and has some really nice dimension. I'm also going to add a little strip of foam to the back of the word friends so that it is popped up as well. I'm popping a lot of things on this card. So we have the sentiment, we have the ground, we have all of our little characters. So we have the two cute little mice. Each of them have a flower. I colored these flowers in a pinky orange kind of color palette to be a little bit different than the yellow and purple flowers across the bottom. And then this stamp set also has two adorable little bees. So we are just going to glue these directly to the background, one on each side. It's like each little mouse has a little bee friend as well. Now there are some little trails for the bees, so I'm going to stamp those in black ink directly onto the background. And then there is also a cute little stamp in here that says buzz, so I will add that as well. I just think that's a really fun, cute little addition for these little bees. Now I'm adding my glitter to the bees' wings, to the center of the flowers, both the die cut flowers and the stamped flowers, and to the word friends. So I'm carefully glittering the whole word friends. Now, I forgot that I wanted twine across the top of this card. I was remaking a card I had already done. So do your twine first and then do your glitter. I'm being very careful not to touch the glitter right now as I wrap my twine around 3 times and then I'm going to tie a bow. So do as I say, not as I do, and put your twine on before you put your glitter because you might run your hand through your glitter while you're trying to tie this twine, and that would really kind of make a mess of your card. So I'm being very careful not to touch that glitter right now. So I wrapped it around 3 times. I'll tie it in a bow over here towards the left. And then once I get that nice and tight, I'll trim off the excess tails of that twine that I have. And now this card is all done. I love the new little mice flowers with those big blooms, and I especially love their tiny little bee friends. And that daisy border is super fun too.
I love this card so much, Shari. It is so super cute, and I love how you use the stencil too. And then this rainbow background is just perfect. I love those borders for this type of card. And then this one, I am just in love with it. I love how you created a daisy background with white ink on kraft cardstock. Next up, we were inspired by Lynette and this gorgeous card she created, and we wanted to make one just like it, but with a different color scheme, which I thought was a fun way to be inspired by a crafty friend. So here we have some sticky note cardstock and some lavender cardstock, and we're going to die cut the border a bunch of times and a bunch of flower centers. And then we're going to add drops of liquid glue into each of the centers of the flowers, and then we're going to use our pick up pokey tool here to pick up all of these little flower centers and layer them on a ton of these borders. So we went ahead and did that with this border, and then we did it with all of the rest of the borders. And then here we'll see we're going to finish up the last one. We just did a fun little fast forward movie magic here, but we did all of these cute little borders, and we are going to be creating a fun background with these. So here we have some white cardstock that's 5.5 by 4.25, a standard size. We're going to flip one of the daisy borders over, add some liquid glue to each of the centers, and then we're going to layer that at the top of the card so that the top of the daisies just go over just a little bit at the top so that it's going to look like this nice continuous pattern. Once you have the first one laid down, then it's really easy to start forming the pattern. And we're going to do that by shifting it over just a little bit so that way they're staggered each time. We continued the pattern on this whole piece, and now we're going to take our scissors and just trim off any of the excess. And by having a little bit of the flowers hanging off the edge of each part of it is what's going to make it really look like a continuous pattern, and it almost looks like this gorgeous like eyelet fabric. Like, I'm obsessed with this. I wish it was a fabric because it is just so beautiful. Now here we have a frame that we're going to die cut from that lavender cardstock so that it coordinates with it, and this is the largest of the stitch rectangle frames, and we're going to add some 3D foam strips. I love that these are the exact size that fit behind all of our frames, and we're going to layer that and then peel off any of the liner paper, and then we can add this on. And by creating that fun little shadow box effect with the foam, I just think it looks so pretty. Next, just like Lynette did, we are going to bring in the Scripty Friends and the Scripty Friends outline, and we're going to die cut it from those same colors of cardstock. And so then we can add some adhesive to the back of the Scripty Friends and then layer it onto that base, which is going to give it this nice pop. And of course we can layer the dot for the eye too. And then we're going to add some foam tape behind this. And I love that the shadow base not only gives it this cool bold look, but it makes it really easy to pop up onto a card. Then once we have that popped up, we thought it would be cute to bring in the Mice Flowers stamp set. So Lynette didn't have this on her card, but I had that extra little mouse that I had stamped and colored and die cut earlier, and we just thought he would be so cute on the card. So here's that little guy, and look how fun that is, right? So I love that that cute little daisy matches with the daisy border. And so we're going to add some foam squares onto this little guy and then layer him to the bottom of the card. And then all we need to do is just finish up the sentiment. So we're going to be using the I'm Glad We're from the Mice Flower stamp set, and we're going to be doing some heat embossing. And so we've got that same lilac cardstock. We're going to stamp in some nice clear sticky ink, and then we can sprinkle on some heat embossing powder and tap off any of the excess. And then we can heat it up with our heat tool, and we'll have a nice bright white shiny sentiment. Then we're going to use our paper trimmer just to trim down a little rectangle right around here, and then just use some scissors to snip off the shorter ends. And then we can add a little foam strip onto the back of this and then add it right onto the card. And now this super cute card is all done. It was so fun to create a die cut background with that daisy border, and these colors are just so beautiful. They're just kind of vintage and awesome, and the little mouse on there is just too much fun. And then next up we have some incredible cards by the design team, and here's a comparison to the one that Lynette made. And I love that you could use any color scheme for this and it would look absolutely amazing. This card here by Tammy, isn't it so sweet? She added those cute new flowers into our wheelbarrow, and the mice flowers look adorable with it. I just love the background that Audrey created. It's the perfect sky for those super cute little mice. And then this card here by Grace is so gorgeous. I love how she made an oval shaped card with the stitched ovals, and then those flowers look so beautiful. And I love how she used the bud of the flowers too. And the I'm Glad We're Friends is so fun out of pattern paper. This card by Mindy is just so sweet, and it shows that the mice flowers are a perfect match for our big blossom backdrop die. These little mice are super cute on tags too. I think this is a fun little tag for a present for someone that would just make them smile. This card by Letitia is just adorable, and I love the colors that she used. They're so bright and happy. And then here, this card by Megan is so sweet. I love how she used that super cute window to frame her adorable scene. This card here by Elise is just so much fun, and I love how she brought in one of my favorite sets, Gleeful Gardens, for those big grassy areas. This card by Anea is just adorable, and I love how she used the washi tape on the card as a way to hold down her rectangles. I love that Melissa die cut the friends in a bunch of different colors and created such a cool, bold card. And then this card by Chari is so sweet, and that little mouse is the mouse from Mice Tools, and I love that he's saying, "I pick you" in the speech bubble. And then this card by Rebecca is just adorable. I love all of those borders there onto that pretty floral pattern paper. So we cannot wait to see all of your cute mice flowers cards and friends cards and tulip border cards and daisy border cards, all the fun, happy, flowery things. So make sure to share them with us. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you have an absolutely amazing day. Bye.